Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. After 11 years of long-distance driving, I've learned to trust my instincts. I've survived more near misses than I'd want to admit, blizzards, and brake problems thanks to that instinct. However, I couldn't have prevented what happened on Interstate 80 last month by slowing down or checking my mirrors. It was waiting for me already. A straightforward delivery route from Ohio to Nevada was the first step. 3 days of virtually non-stop driving with scheduled rest stops at the typical truck stops I was familiar with. The initial 2 days proceeded smoothly. I made good time, got a good cup of coffee, nodded to other drivers at the gas pumps, and did other routine things. However, I knew I had overextended myself on the third night, as around 2 a.m. somewhere in the middle of Nebraska. I had caught myself drifting twice in 10 minutes, and my eyes were burning. I had to stop. The issue was that, some 40 miles ago, I had missed my regular stop. Additionally, the upcoming bigot was 60 minutes before the truck stop. There was nothing except darkness, flat countryside, and the occasional exit that leads to villages so tiny they don't even have gas stations in that dead zone where I was. Exit 47 was the only choice my phone displayed, and the map indicated a rest place. It would do, but it wasn't perfect. I only required 4 hours of rest. The exit ramp curled into total darkness as it left the freeway. Only my headlights were shining through the darkness. There were no buildings or streetlights to be seen. After roughly, I located the rest spot after 4 miles. It was kind of you to call it that. It was essentially a gravel area with a dumpster that appeared to have been emptied months ago, to picnic tables and a boarded up restroom structure. A white cargo van with its back doors facing the trees was the only other car parked at the far end. I nearly continued to drive. At first, there was something off about the area, but instinct was overruled by fatigue. I parked my rig as far away from the vehicle as possible, locked the doors and turned on the engine. I could barely see the van in my mirror through my passenger window. No movement, no lighting. I told myself it was probably another driver sleeping like me. I lay back in my seat and set my phone to alarm for 6 a.m. There was complete quiet. There was no highway noise at this time, far from the freeway, and the trees were still and lifeless, with no wind to stir them. I shut my eyes. I'm not sure how long I had been asleep when the banging came. My driver's side door was tapped 3 times, slowly and deliberately. My heart was already pounding as my eyes suddenly opened. With the exception of my dashboard clock's dim glow, the cab was completely dark. 3:47 a.m. and, while sitting motionless, 3 more knocks. The same beat, the same location. Yes, I yelled while avoiding the door. Silence. No answer. Then I heard footsteps coming from my driver's side and heading toward the front of my truck, crunching on gravel. Measured, slow steps. I sat up, but there was no one in sight through the windshield. The footsteps persisted until they reached the passenger side. A face appeared in my passenger window as I turned my head. It was a man, perhaps 40 years old, with dark eyes that never blinked and a slender face. He simply stood there, gazing through the glass at me. He had a very neutral countenance, not very menacing, but also unusual, as if he was researching something. "Can I help you?" I tried to sound firm as I yelled through the window. He simply continued to stare without answering, grinning, frowning, or moving. I grabbed my phone, holding I fixed him with my eyes, and he looked at my hand. He retreated from the window and left as soon as I raised the phone. I saw him walk toward the white van across the lot, like he had all the time in the world. He moved with this odd, leisurely gait. It was time for me to start my engine and head off. However, I persuaded myself that I was exaggerating. Perhaps he didn't speak English and needed assistance. Perhaps he was confused. When people are fatigued, they act strangely. I saw him arrive at the vehicle, but instead of boarding, he immediately started to stroll around, dragging his hand over the side. He then unlocked the back doors. The van's dome light turned on, but from my vantage point, I couldn't see much. After a moment of staring inside, he shut the doors and climbed into the driver's seat. The lights in the van never came on. He simply sat in the shadows. I attempted to go back to sleep, but was unable to. I continued to stare at the van in my mirror, hoping it would go away, or something would happen. I noticed the dome light flicker on once again at about 4:30. The man had exited, and was making his way back across the lot, this time heading toward the boarded-up restroom building rather than my truck. Around the side of it, he vanished. 5 minutes went by. 10. He never returned. Now, my instincts were yelling at me. I made the decision to go. At the next legitimate truck stop, I could make up the lost sleep time. I turned on my engine, making a deafening noise in the stillness. My headlights swept the lot as I put the car in motion. I noticed the picnic table closest to the van at that point. Something that had undoubtedly not been there when I had arrived was on it. I could see the shape even from a distance. Clothes for women, folded nicely in a pile. A jacket over a pair of pants, followed by smaller stuff underneath. My blood froze. My thoughts were racing with explanations, while I gazed at the table for perhaps 3 seconds. Trash, laundry, and donations. But who, at 4:30 in the morning, leaves folded clothes on a picnic table at an abandoned rest stop? I found out right away. I pressed the gas pedal and returned to the exit ramp more quickly than I should have. On the wheel, my hands were trembling. I was half expecting to see headlights following me as I obsessively checked my mirrors as I joined back onto the freeway. Darkness was all that was present. With my hands still shaking, I drove right through to the next truck stop 60 miles away, pulled in as the sun was just beginning to rise, and sat in the parking lot. I convinced myself that I had most likely misinterpreted the circumstances. Perhaps it was just what it appeared to be. Nothing, a strange man, a few clothes that were left behind, a spooky place to relax, coincidences piled on top of each other. But the picture of those perfectly folded clothing kept coming to mind. How carefully they were stacked. The man's unblinking gaze directed at me. It seemed as though he was checking on something inside the van when he unlocked the doors. I didn't know what I would be reporting, so I did. No crime was seen to me. I didn't see any unlawful activity. A man standing at my window at 3:47 a.m. was merely a sense, a manifestation of wrongness. I chose a different route home after making my delivery on time, and I haven't utilized exit 47 since. I've repeatedly persuaded myself that I most likely just happened upon someone who was having an odd night and acting strangely for odd, but harmless reasons. That I would have seen more, learned more, and been able to take action if something negative had been occurring. However, I occasionally think about those clothing on that picnic table late at night when I'm by myself on an empty highway. I wonder what could have been in that van's rear. I consider what that man might have been planning before I woke up, and why he was so interested in seeing me through my window. And when I left, I wonder whether anyone else pulled over at exit 47. Someone who was too exhausted to follow their instincts. Someone who should have driven away, but didn't. I will never know. That's what sometimes keeps me up at night. My tired mind turned nasty, wondering if I had just driven away from a circumstance that was entirely explainable, or if I had dodged something horrible. The question of whether leaving someone in need of assistance that evening was the best thing I've ever done, or if I was foolish for doing so. This is all I know for sure. I follow my instincts, and they tell me that I was fortunate. In Wyoming, I disregarded my own rule, and I've been regretting it ever since. The regulation is easy. Refrain from picking up hitchhikers. Over the years, I've passed hundreds of these while driving. As my rig passes, Hopeful looks fade and thumbs up. It's survival, not personal. It's impossible to know who you're allowing into your taxi, and for as long it takes them to go to their destination. You were both stuck together in a moving metal box, but I disregarded the rule that March afternoon. I wish I could claim to have a valid excuse. It was one of those high desert spring days that look so lovely, the type of sky that is so azure that it is nearly painful to gaze upon. Despite the boredom of I-80, I was in a good mood and running ahead of schedule as I hauled furniture from Salt Lake City to Spokane. I had just completed a good sandwich at the last truck stop, and classic rock was playing on the radio. I noticed her at that point, standing on the shoulder. She was wearing pants and a grey hoodie, with one arm outstretched and her thumb out, approximately 2 miles past Little America. I could tell she was young, perhaps in her early 20s, even from a distance. I could see her face better as I drew nearer. She appeared worn out, and her expression as she saw my truck pull up was desperate. I ought to have continued. By the time I began to reason, my foot was already releasing the gas. It's daylight. She is half as big as me. What could possibly go wrong? In addition, the next town was 40 miles distant, and she appeared to be truly isolated. If I simply left her out there, what sort of person would I be? She jogged toward the passenger side, and I watched in my mirror as I drove onto the shoulder. Her movements appeared normal, perhaps relieved, but not menacing, and she carried a tiny knapsack. I opened the door. She said, "Thank you so much," and climbed in. Her voice was quiet and a little out of breath. "I've spent 3 hours outside. I had assumed that I would have to walk. Where are you headed?" As I turned back onto the highway, I inquired. She asked, "Anywhere north. I'm trying to get to Montana eventually, but honestly, I'll take whatever gets me out of Wyoming." I didn't press, and she didn't go into detail. I don't mind if people who hitchhike have stories they'd rather not share. For a few minutes, we rode in silence. Even though the cab was heated, she kept her rucksack on her lap and wrapped her arms around it, as if she were cold. I glanced at her a couple of times. She didn't look at me or the surroundings. She was just gazing straight ahead at the road. "You want some water?" Pointing to the bottles I keep in the cup holders, I offered. "Or, in the rear, I have some food." "No, I'm grateful." She spoke in a hurry, almost instinctively, as if she had practiced the answer. More quiet. I abruptly realized how loud the radio seemed, so I turned it down a little. Her hands caught my attention as she moved in her chair. Her right hand was shaking. Her knuckles were white, and they were clutched tightly around the bag straps. It's more like trembling from fright or adrenaline than shivering from cold. "Are you all right?" I inquired. "All right," once more. "Too fast, just tired," she added. Another mile went by. She had not at all relaxed. She appeared more tense, if anything. I found myself questioning why I had chosen to take her up. The positive attitude I had been experiencing was fading, giving way to an underlying uneasiness that I was unable to identify. Her phone began to ring at that point. I could hear the vibration over the engine, and it was in her sweatshirt pocket. She didn't get up to respond. Arms clenched around the rucksack, he simply stared forward. The ringing ceased. It restarted after 10 seconds. I said, "You're going to get that." "No." The ringing ceased. I started over. It rang for perhaps 15 seconds this time. She seemed to be forcing herself not to react as she sat there, stiff. Maybe 20 seconds passed before it started up again after it eventually stopped. I tried to sound informal as I said, "Maybe important." "It isn't." She had a tight jaw. "Can't we just keep it to ourselves?" "Yes," I replied. But now my instincts were telling me there was a serious problem. The phone continued to ring repeatedly, very little time in between calls. She eventually took it out and turned it off after the 7th or 8th time. Now her hands trembled even more. Back in her pocket, she pushed the phone, then re-encircled the backpack with her arms. I was at a loss for words. The cab's mood had changed to one of oppression and weight. I was hyper-aware of her presence and every little movement she made, but I kept my eyes on the road. My thoughts were racing. Who makes such a call repeatedly? A guy who is upset, Was it something else? Or was it someone she owed money to? To what extent are you heading north? Abruptly, she asked. Spokane. Would you be able to drop me off at the next town? Yes. Evanston will be around 20 meters away. Despite her nod, she didn't appear relieved. She appeared more anxious, if anything. She continued to check the road behind us in the side mirror on her side. I looked in the mirror. Nothing out of the ordinary, just regular traffic. Nothing was following us, only a few cars and another halfway back. 4-5 more minutes we drove in silence. Then, so softly that I nearly missed her, she whispered once again, "Back there, do you spot a black SUV?" I took another, more thorough look at my mirrors. Although there were a number of cars behind us, one of them was a black SUV that was at least 4 miles behind us and was moving at the same speed as us. Indeed, there is one. Why? She continued to stare at the mirror without responding. The SUV remained at a safe distance, neither approaching nor retreating. It might have been a coincidence. The way she was observing it made my skin crawl. Even though it might have been just regular traffic. Might have been just regular traffic. Them, I inquired. I'm not sure what is meant by that. For the first time since getting in, she turned to face me, and I could see genuine terror in her eyes. It indicates that I'm not sure if I'm being paranoid or if that is indeed them. I'm not sure if it's a random automobile or if they're following me. I have lost all knowledge. Who are they? She turned back to observe the mirror without responding. The SUV remained in the same spot, keeping the same distance. My own heartbeat quickened. This was really uncomfortable. Now I couldn't quite put my finger on why, but this was beginning to seem hazardous. Look, I replied. Perhaps we should say no if you're in difficulty. She interrupted me. No halting. No cops. I'll leave if you can just get me to Evanston. Please. I was rather uncomfortable with the way she said please. The tone befitted someone who was afraid, but nevertheless striving to maintain composure. Right there, I considered stopping. We were in the middle of nowhere, so it didn't seem right to tell her to get out and leave her on the side of the road if she was truly in danger. So I continued to drive. The black SUV continued to follow us, never getting any closer or farther. I looked over as we passed the exit to a little rest area and noticed her gently exhaling, as she had been holding her breath, fearing that I may turn off. She appeared slightly less tense as I stayed on the highway. I was relieved when Evanston eventually emerged into the distance. Nearly there. This situation is almost finished. Whatever was happening would no longer be my concern when I dropped her off. Self-preservation was screaming at me to get her out of my truck, even though I realize that sounds heartless. Where do you want me to drop you? As we got closer to the first exit, I inquired. The gas station is all right. I pulled into a Flying J and said, any gas station, as I exited. She had her hand on the door handle and her seatbelt undone before I had even stopped completely. She virtually sprang out of the truck when I put it in park. She said, "Thank you," and began to move away from the truck. "I appreciate the ride. Will you be all right?" Through the open door, I inquired. "I'll figure it out." She was moving with the same desperate vigor as she scanned the parking lot. "You ought to leave." "What?" "You ought to go immediately. Don't remain here." Still holding that backpack to her chest, she turned and rushed for the gas station entrance before I could reply. As I sat there with the engine running, I watched her go inside. 30 seconds later, the black SUV arrived at the parking lot and parked close to the air pump station. No one left. My instinct was to go, to forget this whole afternoon had ever happened, to put Evanston in my rearview mirror. But I had to wait for something. Curiosity, perhaps. Perhaps worrying. I spent 5 minutes observing the SUV. No one left yet. I could see her inside the petrol station, pointing vehemently as she spoke to someone behind the desk. My phone then rang. An identified number. Something forced me to answer when I nearly didn't. On the other end, there was silence. It's the quiet of someone purposefully not talking, not dead air. Someone is paying attention. "Hello," I said. The phone call concluded. With a sudden dry mouth, I gazed at my phone. How were my number obtained? Was it a coincidence, perhaps, an unsolicited call? However, the timing seemed too exact, too planned. I turned to face the SUV. I couldn't see inside because the windows were darkly tinted, but I could definitely feel someone watching me, waiting and watching. I left to see what it's for. With my hands clutching the wheel too tightly and my eyes continually checking my mirrors, I placed my truck in gear and resumed driving on the interstate. I was not followed by the SUV. I couldn't be certain, but I don't think it did. After making my delivery in Spokane, I took a different route back to Utah, completely avoiding Wyoming. What was going on with that female was never revealed to me. I never came across any news articles that could have provided an explanation. I never received another enigmatic call. Sometimes, though, in the middle of the night, I wonder what she didn't say, why she turned off her phone other than blocking the number, why she told me to get out, and who was in that SUV and what they wanted. And when she got into my pickup, I wonder what they thought. Were they following us all the way? Were they anticipating anything? Most troubling of all, was it a warning when I received that call in the parking lot? Or were they simply verifying that I was the one who had picked her up? I don't pick up hitchhikers, and I don't hitchhike myself. No more. That regulation has been reinstated indefinitely. The difficulty with breaking the rules is that you never know what you're letting into your life until it's already there, sitting next to you, bringing its secrets, difficulties, and risks. In Evanston, I was fortunate. Nothing occurred to me as I drove away after dropping her off. However, I still feel as though I was a part of something that day. There was some bigger scenario that I didn't comprehend, that whoever was in the SUV might be observing, assessing, or cataloguing me. And I think about that stillness on the other end, and wonder if they're still out there, still watching, still waiting for a cause to call me again every time my phone rings from an unknown number. The weigh stations are familiar to all truckers. After weighing yourself and completing the necessary documentation, you roll over the scales and leave in 5 minutes. It's monotonous, even dull. You don't even need to stop when the lights are green, which they usually are. An interminable route with yet another checkpoint. Up until the night I was flagged in at 3:15 a.m. That is what I thought about the weigh station on Route 20 in northern Idaho. I had been going to Minnesota with a bunch of devices since Seattle. That area of Idaho grows dark in late September in a way that seems almost tangible, as if the night had weight. There was no moon that night, only the occasional reflection of animal eyes in the trees and my headlights piercing the darkness. After 6 hours of driving and 4 more hours until my planned rest stop, I was starting to get into the habit of driving without thinking. With its typical advanced warning signs, the weigh station came into view in my headlights. The lights were red. That meant stopping for good. With a sigh, I began to slow down. Weigh stations working this late wasn't unusual, but it wasn't unheard of either. They were most likely conducting sporadic inspections, perhaps searching for fatigued drivers who shouldn't be driving. In a few minutes, I would be waved through. I waited after pulling onto the scales. I could see through my windshield, take a look at the inspector's little office. Inside, lights are on, but there is no sign of movement. There was a faint hydraulic hiss as my truck settled. My weight would be automatically transmitted by the scales. The light would turn green, and I would be allowed to leave at any moment, or someone would come out to verify my documentation. I waited for 1 and 2 minutes. The building has not moved, and the light has not changed. It was habitual for me to check my mirrors. Behind me, the highway was deserted. Neither direction has headlights. This weigh station in the middle of nowhere. Only myself. I noticed the building's door opening at 3 minutes. A man appeared on the street wearing black clothes and what appeared to be the normal luminous vest. The place was well lit, but he had a flashlight, and he took calculated, cautious steps toward my driver's side door. I was disturbed by his movements, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. Perhaps too deliberate, too sluggish. When he got to my door, I rolled down my window. Evening, I said, was marked for examination. He took a while to answer. He simply stood there and shone his flashlight at me. Glaring at me directly, I raised a hand and squinted. Could you less than that? After 2 more seconds, the light remained on my face before lowering to indicate my door panel. I could see his face more clearly in the less glare. He was lean, perhaps 50 years old, and had deep-set eyes that seemed to be examining me with exceptional vigor. "License and logbook," he reported. He spoke in a flat, rather robotic voice. I passed them on, taking them without comment. He continued to move with that odd unhurried pace as he made his way back toward the structure. I observed him vanish inside. I could see him standing at a desk through the windows, peering down at my documents. But he wasn't typing or writing anything, he was simply standing there with my license in his hand. After 5 minutes, 10 came. This wasn't typical. Before they even check at the cargo, even comprehensive inspections don't take this long. I thought about honking, but I was halted. In a manner I couldn't describe, something felt strange about the whole thing. The silent way station, the deserted roadway, and the inspector's gaze on me. At last he came out of the building once more. However, he wasn't by himself this time. He was followed out by a second man, who was also in uniform and with a torch. I could not hear the discussion they were having as they strolled together toward my pickup. As if they were talking about me personally, the second man kept looking up at my cab and then back at the first man. They came to a halt before my door. My license was still with the first inspector. "We must conduct a thorough examination," he stated. "What's wrong? Please get out of the car. My wait ticket from the last station is with me. Everything is up to date and lawful. What's wrong? Get out of the car." It was no longer a request. He was now speaking in a harsher, more demanding tone. The second inspector had shifted to the side and a little behind, so he could view the back of my trailer and me. A chill took hold of my gut. This was not a routine practice. I've had dozens of inspections, and unless there's a special reason, they usually don't ask you to get out of the car. Furthermore, they do not strategically arrange themselves as though they anticipate trouble. Keeping my voice steady, I said, "I'd like to see your supervisor." "I am in charge," the first man declared. "Get out of the car now, or we'll have to take things further." "How do you escalate?" I wanted to question that, but something in his gaze warned me to press the issue. This profession has taught me to read people, and what I was reading from him was incorrect. A sort of icy resolve that frightened me more than fury would have, but not quite aggressiveness. I climbed down after unlocking my door. As soon as my feet touched the ground, the second inspector shifted to the rear of my trailer. As said by the first, "We're going to need to see inside. The shipment has been sealed. I have records. Crack it open." I retrieved my keys with trembling hands and made my way to the rear of the trailer. This was incorrect. This was all wrong. No sealed cargo is opened by way stations without a specific reason, and they certainly don't do it with this level of passion at 3 in the morning. However, what option did I have? Don't. Then what? In addition to having my license and logbook, I was by myself on a deserted highway with 2 men who didn't resemble any inspectors I had ever met. I opened the trailer's doors and unlocked it. With his flashlight in hand, the second inspector hurried inside. He was moving, and I could hear the sound of boxes shifting. I could smell cigarette smoke on the first inspector's outfit as he stood beside me. He watched me as his companion searched my baggage without saying anything. "What are you looking for?" At last, I inquired. "We'll know when we find it." My blood ran cold when I heard that response. They weren't searching for safety infractions or overweight cargo. They had a specific search in mind. What, though, did they believe was in my truck, and why? After perhaps 5 minutes, the second inspector climbed out of the trailer. He gave his partner a headshake, just that little gesture, no words. The jaw of the first inspector tensed. He had a look on his face that I couldn't decipher. Where was his shipment loaded? Seattle. The lighting bill is with me. It's all documented. It was packaged by whom? I'm not sure. I get it from a storage facility, I drive it after they load and seal it. It operates that way. He looked at me for a while. I followed his stare as he turned back to the building. A third individual, whom I had not previously observed, was now visible through the window. They appeared to be observing us even though they were only a silhouette standing in the rear of the room. Closure, the first inspector, said abruptly. "Trailer." I paused, perplexed by the sudden shift. "Am I cleared to go?" "Close your trailer and get back in your truck." My hands fumbling with the latch, I followed his instructions. Both inspectors were making their way back to the building as I turned around. Though not running, I'm moving more quickly than previously. That same coordinated tempo that seems practiced. When I got back into my taxi, I saw that my license and logbook were on the passenger seat. They weren't there because of me. I must have been at the back of the trailer when one of them reached through my open window. The light changed to green. I wasted no time in doubting it. I turned on my engine and resumed driving on the highway, observing the way station vanish in my reflections. I could feel the thumping of my heart in my throat. I spent 20 hours driving, miles until my hands became sufficiently steady to hold the wheel. I was trying to make sense of what had just happened, and my mind was racing. Did they actually act as inspectors? The behavior was completely inappropriate, even though the uniforms looked okay. Who was the third individual hiding in the shadows? In my trailer, what were they searching for? Around mile 30, the scariest thought occurred. What if something had been planted by them? What if the second inspector had been adding to my cargo instead of searching it? I nearly stopped to be sure, but my nervousness prevented me. What if I were being followed and they wanted to check my own load? What if I were somehow implicated in something I didn't comprehend if I and that trailer again? I made the decision to continue traveling directly to Minnesota. I only stopped at the largest, busiest truck stops I could find for fuel, locations with witnesses and cameras. I would wait to open the trailer until I was at my destination and surrounded by other people. I had the longest night of my life for the remainder of it. I felt threatened by every pair of headlights behind me. Even with green lights, my chest constricted each time I went by another way station. I kept looking in my mirrors, expecting to see the same dark car and those same two men pull me over on false pretenses. 36 hours later, I arrived at the delivery warehouse in Minnesota, where I witnessed them unloading and unsealing my trailer with more care than I had ever seen. Each box that arrived, I looked for anything that didn't match the manifest or seemed strange as I got off that truck, but everything checked out. Every item was there, nothing extra, nothing weird. The delivery was approved by the warehouse supervisor. "All right," he said. "Package that is clean." It should have made me feel better. Rather, I was more perplexed and uneasy than before. What were those men at the way station searching for, if my goods was in perfect condition? Or, even more unsettlingly, did they discover it? Did I overlook something in those boxes? Anything that I unintentionally carried 3 states? I returned to Seattle after filing my route report. This time, I made the return trip during the day via Route 20 through Idaho. I halted to take a closer look at the way station as I passed it. Green lights were on. A few trucks were rolling. Across the scales, a normal inspector in a normal uniform was reviewing normal paperwork, and it was open and running normally. Even though everything appeared to be perfectly normal, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that what had happened to me that evening wasn't at all typical. That perhaps I had accidentally happened onto something I shouldn't have seen, carried, something I shouldn't have, or been put through an inexplicable test. Since then, I've travelled that trip 6 times. At that way station, I now consistently receive green lights, never stopped and never flagged. And for some reason, that annoys me more than getting stopped again. Similar to what they sought, they either discovered it or disqualified me. I feel as though I've been flagged in a system that I can't access, classified as complicit or clear, or simply another driver who avoids asking too many questions. I occasionally consider reporting those to inspectors. That odd stop, and the way they examined my goods, as if they knew exactly what they were searching for in a report, I would submit to the dot. However, what would I say? That I was inspected after being hauled into a way station. It's literally what they do. That they behave strangely, subjective, that is. That even though official procedures were improper, I felt threatened by men wearing official uniforms doing them. I haven't spoken, so I continue to drive. And I always get that same chill in my chest when I get close to a way station late at night, especially when I'm traveling on a deserted stretch of highway. That same knowledge that our roadways aren't as impartial as they appear to be. We will never be able to tell if we were the target or only the vehicle when we are drawn into something bigger than ourselves for reasons we will never comprehend. Outside of Amarillo, I spotted the first truck. It was identical to mine in terms of make and model, year, and dark blue color. The wheel wells even had the same mud pattern, as if we had driven through the same puddles. I recall thinking it was a hilarious coincidence that it was parked at a truck stop while I was getting gas. Even though there are millions of trucks on the road, you rarely see one that is almost identical to you. I had traveled this road 100 times before, transporting refrigerated items from Texas to Colorado. There was nothing noteworthy about the day or the job. The roads were clean, but it was early November and cold enough that I could see my breath when I went outdoors. Without thinking about that other truck until 2 hours later, I had coffee, went to the bathroom, and then got back on I-40, just over the border with New Mexico. The identical truck, the same color, was parked at a rest area. It was backed into a space next to the restrooms as I pulled in for a brief rest. Curious now, I slowed as I went by it. The trailer was set up differently than mine. It was a flatbed. The cab was the same, but it was chilled. It's the same model, paint job, and aftermarket mirrors that I put in last year. It was too dark to see through the tinted windows. I sat there for a minute, observing it in my side mirror, to pulling into a position 3 spots down and turning off my engine. I couldn't quite put my finger on why, but I felt uncomfortable viewing it again. Coincidences occur. Perhaps we were taking different paths. Perhaps the driver shared my truck preferences. On my way to the restroom, I passed the truck and stepped out to stretch my legs. I saw the license plate as I approached. The numbers were just 3 digits different from my own plate, and it came from Montana, which is the same state as me. The likelihood of that seemed extremely high. A strange sensation crept up my spine as I paused and gazed at the plate for a while. Windows were dark, and the driver's door was closed. I couldn't tell if anyone was within. Something prevented me from knocking, even if I considered joking about our matching trucks. Rather, I went to the restroom, sprayed my face with water, and told myself that I was being silly. 5 minutes later, the truck was gone when I returned outside. I searched the parking lot, but I couldn't find it. There was no noise from the engine, no indication that it was pulling out. I had scarcely been inside when it vanished. I felt uneasy in a way I couldn't describe as I made my way back to my own pickup. I couldn't identify anything specifically wrong, but the whole event felt strange. It was just a strange coincidence that became more stranger. I attempted to shake it off and got back on the freeway. The radio was useful. I allowed the cacophony of a talk show host discussing conspiracy ideas to drown out the oddities in my mind. I still had 6 hours of driving left, and I had to concentrate. I saw it again 3 hours later, on the highway. It was perhaps a quarter of a mile ahead of me this time. The same blue truck, staying in the right lane at a constant speed. My heart began to race. This was no longer a coincidence. There was more to this. I reduced the speed, allowing the gap to widen. The truck continued to go in the correct lane, traveling like any other car without accelerating or decelerating. However, I was unable to look away from it. It matched mine in every way. The lights placement, the exhaust design, and even the rig's overall slight leftward tilt. The same thing happened to my truck. 4 months. I had been meaning to get the suspension examined. I watched it from back there for maybe 10 miles. Then, as if the driver had forgotten to signal, it simply slipped off the highway and made an exit without making any noise. I ought to have been glad it was gone. Instead, though, I became more nervous. Where was it going? Would I see it once more? I continued to drive while continuously checking my mirrors. The sun was now beginning to set, turning everything red and orange. The path was covered in shadows. I closely examined each truck I went by, making sure it wasn't following me. It wasn't the blue one. In that region of the country, night fell quickly. It was completely dark by the time I entered Colorado, save for the red tail lights of oncoming cars and my headlights. The road was beginning to ascend, and I was getting close to the mountains. I intended to get dinner at a truck stop just outside of Pueblo and spend the night there. I noticed it in my rearview mirror at that point. The identical truck, headlights at just that height, keeping the same distance behind me, not approaching, not retreating, just following. My mouth became parched. I accelerated. Behind me, the truck accelerated. I reduced my speed. It decelerated. As though we were bound together by an unseen thread, we consistently kept the same distance. Then I reached for my CB radio. This is Channel 19, Blue Mountain. Anyone in the vicinity of I-25 mile marker 65, north, not moving. Then a voice. Blue Mountain, go ahead. A truck is following me. Montana plates on a dark blue Freightliner. Anyone know who that might be? A moment of silence. Then, not able to assist you, friend. Why don't you simply stop and give him space? He doesn't seem to want to pass. More immobile. The voice returned, but this time it was flatter. Then he might be heading in the same direction as you. He stated it in a way that made my skin crawl. Setting the CB aside, I concentrated on driving. Behind me, the truck remained frozen in place, like I'd seen it do before. I took the next exit without indicating. A brief random choice to observe the outcome. The truck came up behind. Now my hands were slippery on the steering wheel. A narrow 2-lane road ran through the dark countryside after the exit. There are no houses or lights, only bare darkness on either side. This was a mistake that I discovered too late. I ought to have stayed on the road, where there was other people, traffic, and witnesses. It was only me and the person in the truck behind me out here. I applied more pressure on the gas. My speed was matched by the truck. Now that I could see it clearly in my mirrors, I could even make out details. And then I saw something that made my blood freeze. At least I couldn't see anyone in the driver's seat, so the cab was vacant. An empty interior was illuminated by the dash lights. The vehicle was going, following, and keeping a perfect distance even though there was no one driving. I blinked vigorously, sure I was observing incorrectly. The stress, the gloom, and the strange coincidences throughout the day. Perhaps I was becoming crazy. However, the cab appeared to be empty when I glanced again. I was being followed by an empty truck on a pitch-black road in the middle of nowhere. Tires squealing. I turned without slowing down much after seeing a sign for a 24-hour petrol store. The truck behind me also made a nice and controlled turn. With the exception of 2 automobiles, the gas station lot was largely deserted when I pulled in. After parking in the brightest light I could find, I sat there and watched my mirrors while the engine ran. The truck stopped after pulling up behind me at the same distance and location. For about 2 minutes, we sat there with neither of us moving and both motors running. I could see regular individuals going about their daily lives in the petrol station, including an elderly woman perusing the snack section and a weary-looking attendant behind the desk. I could exit, enter, and request assistance. But what are you helping with? A truck that coincidentally used the same exit as me did. I finally made up my mind. I switched off the engine, picked up my phone, and exited the vehicle. I intended to approach that other truck and have a look inside. Look who was behind the wheel. Ask them why they were pursuing me. Put an end to this horror. I walked 3 paces in the direction of the truck. Its engine cut out. The illumination turned dark. I paused, suddenly unsure. The truck resembled mine much more in the dark. Everything is the same, including the silhouettes and clothing styles, like observing a shadowed image of my own car. I walked a step further. The door of the driver opened. I was unable to observe who had escaped. Just a medium-height figure wearing what appeared to be comparable to the clothing I was wearing. Baseball cap, jeans, and dark jacket. They were standing at the open door, observing without coming close to me. "Why are you following me?" Trying to maintain a steady voice, I cried out. No response. The figure just stood there, a silhouette in the darkness between streetlights. Then I held out my phone and yelled, "I'm calling the police." As if contemplating this, the figure cocked its head slightly. After that, it climbed back into the vehicle, shut the door, turned on the motor, and abruptly left the parking lot. Just left. No drama, no rush. With my heart pounding in my chest, I watched until the tail lights went out of sight down the street. What on earth had just occurred? I surveyed the parking area. There were still 2 cars. The service station remained open. Everything was as usual, except that my shirt was drenched in sweat and I was trembling. I entered and purchased coffee that I never drank. The attendant inquired about my well-being. I claimed to be all right. Could I say anything else? Off the highway, I was followed by a truck that resembled mine. One of the drivers, dressed similarly, came out and looked at me. Even in my imagination, it all sounded crazy. I returned to my pickup and proceeded directly to my destination. Drove without stopping or sleeping. I kept looking for the blue truck in my mirrors, but I never saw it again. The following morning, when I eventually made my delivery, I was worn out, suspicious, and doubting what I had witnessed. At the depot, I inquired as to whether anyone else had encountered issues traveling that route. People are following strange trucks. No one understood what I was discussing. I outlined the truck's make, model, and Montana plates in great detail. "Sounds like half the trucks on the road, buddy," commented one of the other drivers with a simple shrug. He was correct. The only unique thing about its truck was that it was identical to mine. Perhaps that's what frightened me the most. The notion that, like a mirror, was unaware I had. Someone is out there driving a truck just like mine, dressing similarly, making similar decisions, and having comparable ancestry. Or perhaps I am the one who is following them, and I am simply unaware of it at this time. I continue to travel that way. Blue trucks are still visible to me, and each time, I slow down to make sure it's not the one by looking at the plates and the cab. I haven't seen it since. That particular arrangement, those particular numbers, but I'm sure it exists someplace. And occasionally, on deserted highways in the middle of the night, I question if it's in front of or behind me, or if perhaps I'm not understanding in some manner. Both are involved. Around midnight, the detour signs emerged on Nevada's Highway 50, which is known as the loneliest road in America. In the dozens of times I had drove it, I had never seen any maintenance or construction, just empty highways slicing across an infinite desert. Something told me right away that something was wrong when I saw those orange signs in my headlights. Road closed ahead, detour right. However, what option did I have? The signage appeared sufficiently authoritative. The typical arrow indicating an exit is accompanied with reflective orange diamonds. I had no memory of being there. Already running behind time, I was transporting machinery parts from Reno to Denver, and going back would take up hours that I didn't have. I chose the detour. Although paved, the road was small, my truck could hardly fit on it. There was only cracked asphalt that vanished into the night, with neither a center line nor a shoulder. There were no houses or other roads branching out, but my headlights picked up sagebrush and the occasional fence post. There is only this one trail that leads farther into nothing. I kept looking at my GPS, but it said that I was on Highway 50 rather than the route I was actually on. I was obstinately told I was on the major roadway by the tiny blue dot. I attempted to convince myself that the detour was too recent to be in the system and that it was simply old mapping data. Even as my truck bounced over potholes and the road curved in ways the GPS said it shouldn't. I should have circled back to 50 or hit another highway after 20 minutes. Rather, the road simply continued, navigating the desert as though it were purposefully avoiding any valuable moving. Since making the detour, I hadn't seen another car. I hadn't noticed any lights other than mine. I saw the car on the side of the road at that point. A sedan with flashing warnings, possibly 10 years old, was parked on a gravel pullout. I could see someone standing next to it, waving their arms as I approached. It appeared to be a woman, alone. My instinct was to continue driving. When nothing about the scenario makes sense, you don't halt on a dark road in the middle of nowhere. However, she appeared desperate, and I couldn't let my conscience ignore her. About 30 feet in front of her automobile, I slowed down and pulled over. I kept my engine running while I observed her approaching my side mirror. She walked rapidly, nearly sprinting, and I could see her face in my dome light when she got to my window. She had short dark hair, huge scared eyes, and was around 35 years old. "Thank God," she exclaimed, panting. "I've spent more than an hour stranded here. I haven't seen a single car before you, and my phone is dead. What happened? I'm not sure. I got here by following the detour signs, and then my automobile suddenly died. Refuses to flip over. Won't accomplish anything." She looked at me, then back at her car. "Could you please drive me to the next town or wherever else with cellular service?" Her narrative disturbed me for some reason. The caution lights were still glowing brightly and steadily, even though the battery would have died if her car had been dead for an hour. She added that she had also been paying attention to detour notices. How many individuals were being drawn onto this route by those signs? "Where did you go?" I inquired. "Colorado. Around midnight. I noticed the detour signs on Highway 50. I had spotted them at the same moment. Everything is the same, including the journey," I said. "Get in?" A choice I immediately questioned. "However, we must return to the main road. There is a problem with this detour." I saw that she had neither a bag nor a purse as she got into the passenger seat, even though she claimed to have been trying to acquire a signal. She was wearing pants and a light jacket, sliding into my taxi as if she had anticipated the journey. Her words were, "Thank you so much. I was beginning to believe that I would spend the entire night out here." I didn't answer. I was concentrating on turning my truck around, which was difficult on such a little road. A 3-point turn turned into a 5.1. I was sweating because my trailer was jackknifing at angles. With her hands folded in her lap, she watched in silence the entire time. I started driving, for I was eventually directed back the way I had come. Going in this direction, the road appeared different, or perhaps I was simply more conscious of how incorrect everything felt. My headlights didn't seem to go as far as they should. The pavement felt worse, and the blackness seemed denser. "What's your name?" After a few minutes of stillness, she inquired. "Mark. My name is Sarah." She grinned, but it was short of her eyes. "Mark, you save lives. Really? Where's your phone?" I inquired. "What? You claim to have tried calling for assistance. Where's your phone?" She paused only a split second. "In my vehicle." The danger lights were still operational even after the battery died. One more hesitancy. Another battery. She was telling lies. I was aware, and she could tell I knew it by the way she was staring at me now. Even while the heater was operating, the cab's temperature seemed to decline. I was hyper-aware of her presence, and how exposed I was in my truck in the middle of nowhere with a stranger. But I kept my eyes on the road. "How far will it be before we reach the highway?" she inquired. "It ought to happen shortly. It's been around 10 minutes since we started driving. Getting thus far down the diversion took me a lot longer than that." Perhaps you were moving more slowly. Perhaps her gaze had shifted from the road to me. Her gaze were palpable on the side of my face. Alternatively, this road may not function in both ways. That phrase, which was absurd but wonderfully captured how terrible everything is, lingered between us. Suddenly desperate to return to Highway 50, to civilization, to anything other than this dark road tunnel, I stepped up my gas pedaling. "There," she murmured, gesturing to the future. "That's the main roadway, right?" I looked in the direction she was pointing. I could see lights in the distance, About a half-mile in front of me, there was a glow on the horizon that suggested civilization, but it wasn't traffic lights or street lights. I felt a wave of relief. The lights, however, resolved into something that made my stomach turn as we drew nearer. An entire cluster of detour signs with arrows pointing in various directions, resembling a maze. Beyond them, 3 distinct roads that resembled the one we were on exactly diverged into the night. In which direction? Sarah inquired, and suddenly her voice had a peculiar quality. Perhaps it's anticipation rather than fear. I brought the truck to a stop. Each of the 3 roads had the same appearance. There were no signs of what they led to. There are no obvious landmarks. There are just 3 shadowy trails that go to the desert. I was still on Highway 50. According to my GPS, the straight line I should have been following was still visible. I said, "I don't know." Visible. I said, "I don't know." She said, "Take the middle one." Why? Just a gut instinct. In the dashboard's light, I gazed at her. Her face appeared different, tougher, and more certain. Not like someone who was terrified and stranded, but rather like someone who was fully aware of their location and the situation. "Get out," I said. "What? Now get off my truck." She gave me a prolonged look. Then she smiled. And it was real this time. "Mark, you're intelligent. Superior to the others in intelligence. Who else?" She simply opened the door and climbed out without responding. She was standing in front of my truck, where my headlights were shining. I also took note of her attire for the first time. She had mentioned wearing jeans and a light jacket. However, the jacket was incorrect. Light costume garments, overly fresh and clean, as well as her footwear. They appeared strange in some way, but I couldn't really see them in the light. She repeated, raising her voice loud enough to be heard through my closed windows, "The middle road. That's how you get back. Or choose one of the other options. It's really up to you. Every one of them goes somewhere." "Where?" She simply grinned and continued to stare at me as she moved back into the shadows between the middle and right roadways. The darkness engulfed her in a matter of seconds. She had left. I sat there looking at the 3 highways while the motor was idle. The right one, the middle one, and the left one are all incorrect and identical. 3/4 of a tank was displayed on my fuel gauge. If I had to, I could drive 4 hours. If it came to that, it would be sufficient to try all 3 routes. However, what if they all simply resulted in more branches, options, and unproductive roads? I went in the opposite direction. Just impulse, no rationale. 40 minutes of driving through more gloom, desert emptiness, and nothing. Then, at last, I caught sight of it. Highway 50 is a true, solid sight, complete with appropriate road signs and the occasional passing automobile. As soon as I merged onto it, I sensed the distinction. This actually happened. This was accurate. It took me 3 hours to arrive at a truck stop in Utah, but I didn't stop until then. Pulled in as the sun was rising, encircled by other trucks, regular people, and the everyday experience of a flying J at the break of day. For 20 minutes, I just sat in my taxi, breathing and feeling thankful to be in a genuine place. The diversion was never reported by me. How would I respond? I encountered an odd woman after taking a wrong turn, traveled on roads that might not exist for an hour. In the daytime, it all sounded crazy, like a hallucination or stress dream caused by too many hours spent behind the wheel. But ever since, I've been thinking about it, about Sarah and her car, which had working hazard lights but was dead, about her insistence on taking the middle road out of the 3, regarding her parting remarks. Every one of them goes somewhere. I've also been curious about the other drivers she brought up, those who lacked my level of intelligence. The people who picked up Sarah before me made different decisions, or perhaps chose the correct or medium path. I have pondered whether they ever returned to Highway 50. Since then, I've made a dozen trips along that section of Nevada. Now, it's always during the day, and you're constantly on the lookout for those orange detour signs. They haven't been seen since. The road is always clear, open, and in the proper position, as if that night had never occurred. However, I occasionally see cars parked alone with flashing hazard lights at truck stops or rest areas, and I see others standing next to them, beckoning for assistance, and I'm curious as to whether they're real, stranded, or anything else, something that waits for vehicles to make a poor decision while standing next to imaginary highways. I no longer stop. It's for safety, I tell myself, because you can't trust strangers on deserted roads. However, the truth is that I'm scared of what I might if I'm looking too closely. I'm worried that I'll recognize that words, that clothing, and that smile. You're intelligent, superior to the others in intelligence, and I'm worried that I might not be wise enough to make the correct decision the next time. Somewhere between Tulsa and Little Rock, at about 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, the CB radio came alive. I had been listening to the typical trucker conversation when a new voice emerged. They were grumbling about the weather, traffic, and the odd joke. Any drivers heading west on I-40 near mile marker 140. The voice had a tiny southern accent, but it was professional and quiet. It's nothing out of the ordinary. I had a cargo of auto parts and was traveling west at mile marker 135 at the time. Iron Horse is this, I replied, about 5 miles east of you. What are you in need of? Friend, I'm just trying to organize a convoy. Numbers and safety during these long evenings. Are you intrigued? I had experience with convoys when traveling the same route. Drivers occasionally band together, particularly in inclement weather or in regions where aggressive drivers are common. In addition to making the journey less isolating, having another truck close by in case something goes wrong is comforting. Yes, I replied. What handle do you have? Keep an eye out at night. I already have 2 others with me. At mile marker 145. We are at the truck stop. We'll organize once you pull in. Make a copy of that. I'll see you in a few. 10 minutes later, I saw the truck halt in my headlights. It was one of those little businesses, not a big chain, with maybe a dozen parking spaces and a dilapidated looking structure that had restrooms and a convenience store. I could already make out a little older Peterbilt to typical long-haul rigs and 3 trucks parked in a row. I parked beside them and took hold of my CB phone. I'm here. Iron Horse to Night Watch. Copy that. Iron Horse. And come talk to me in person. Simpler than conducting everything via radio. I got out of my taxi and climbed down. My breath was a mist in the cool night air. A tall, possibly 50-year-old man with a baseball cap pulled down, and a heavy jacket came up from the direction of the Peterbilt. He held out his hand. The word Night Watch, he said. Appreciate you joining us. No issue. Inside. Where are the others having their coffee? Ought to go in a minute. He looked at the trucks behind him. As far as Oklahoma City is concerned, we're all traveling west on 40. I reasoned that we might as well drive together. It made enough sense. We discussed cargo and routes. The typical small conversation among truckers. Then 2 more men came out of the structure. Roadrunner and Shepherd, 2 reserved men who nodded but spoke little, were introduced. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about them felt strange. Perhaps everyone was exhausted because it was late. Okay, Night Watch responded. We'll do it this way. I'll be the leader. You, and in the center is the Roadrunner. Shepherd comes last. We maintain distance. Keep channel 19 open and stop if someone has to. Does that sound good? It sounds good, I concurred. We lined up and returned to our trucks. Night Watch was the first to pull out, followed by Roadrunner, Shepherd, and me. We lined up neatly and merged back onto Interstate 40. 4 vehicles make their way through the night in unison. It was all right for the first hour, typical driving of a convoy. The miles passed while we kept our distance from one another and exchanged lane changes. Other from sporadic check-ins, the CB remained largely silent. At this hour, the roadway was almost deserted save for us and the occasional passing vehicle. The voice of Night Watch then rang out on the CB. Alert, convoy. For the past 10 minutes or more, a car has been pacing us. The silver vehicle was a quarter of a mile away. I looked in my mirrors. It turned out that an automobile was back there. Headlights stay at a steady distance. I see it, I said. Night watch went on. Probably nothing, but watch it. Tell me if it has any effect. Uncommon. For an additional 20 meters. The sedan remained behind us, never approaching or retreating. It was odd, but not out of the ordinary, because it's simpler than continuously changing speed. Humans occasionally match the pace of trucks. The voice of Roadrunner then emerged, tense. Another one is on the way. The dark SUV simply followed and collided with the automobile. My stomach grew constricted. The SUV moved behind the car, and I saw it in my mirror. There are now 2 cars, both staying with our convoy and keeping precise distances. I tried to seem calm as I responded. Could be coincidence. Maybe, said Night Watch, or possibly spotters. Keep your doors secured and be vigilant, everyone. Spotted. The air was heavy with the word. Spotters are occasionally used by organized crime organizations to locate precious cargo before planning ambushes in rest areas or on peaceful sections of the route. Although it was uncommon, it did occur, and we might have been in grave danger if that's what this was. What do you want to do? Shepard inquired. There was something icy about his voice, which I had not heard before we had begun driving. Disengaged, we stay together, according to Night Watch, unless there is an emergency. Never stop for anything. As long as we're moving and together, they won't try anything if they're spotters. 10 more meters went by. Behind us, the SUV and car remained in line. A pickup truck then emerged as a third car, merging onto the highway and instantly lining up behind the SUV. It's 3 now, I remarked in a strained voice into the CB. Nobody answered. The radio quiet was suffocating and thick. I held onto observing those 3 pairs of headlights, keeping a precise distance and checking my mirrors. This wasn't typical traffic conduct. This was planned. At that moment, I became aware of something that chilled me to the bone. Roadrunner's pickup was slowing down in front of me. Just 5 or 10 miles per hour isn't much, but it's enough to get us closer. In order to keep my distance, I reduced my speed, which meant that the cars behind me were also approaching. I remarked, "You're slowing down, Roadrunner," into the CB. "The engine is acting up. Sorry, power outage." However, his brake lights were not blinking as they usually do when the engine is having trouble. This deceleration was controlled, intentional. "If you're having trouble, pull over," I advised. "No, I will continue. Just keep your distance." However, in order to keep my distance, I also had to slow down, which meant that the cars behind me were catching up. Now that I was close enough, I could see 2 figures in the front seats of the automobile. It was closely followed by the pickup and SUV, and they were all getting closer. "Night Watch," I responded, attempting to avoid sounding panicked. "There's a problem. We must maintain our formation." I was interrupted by Night Watch. "Night Watch, we are more powerful. Collectively, don't separate." However, every instinct told me to leave this convoy, to accelerate, to stop, or to do anything else, but remain confined between these trucks while those cars were approaching in behind. This was not defense. It was a trap, I decided. I broke formation by accelerating and shifting into the left lane. My mirror displayed the sedan. "Hurry up right away and follow me." However, the sedan drifted back as I pushed my vehicle harder. Opening up distance, I and horse went back into position. The tone of Night Watch's voice had sharpened. "The kindness has vanished. No, I'm going to disconnect." "It's a mistake." I didn't answer. My truck stayed to the left lane, overtaking the convoy and observing in my mirrors as the 3 cars and 4 trucks remained in formation behind me. They made no attempt to catch up. They simply let me leave. For the next 40 miles, I drove by myself, continually checking my mirrors in the hopes of seeing headlights pursuing me. Behind me, however, the highway remained dark. I eventually arrived at a large truck stop close to Oklahoma City, where I parked my car beneath the brightest lights I could find. I had trembling hands, observing the door for 20 minutes. I waited to see if those trucks or other cars would follow me inside. They never showed up. I tried phoning Night Watch after grabbing my CB. No answer. Roadrunner was tried. Nothing. Shepherd. Quiet. They had either turned off their radios or changed the channels. Or perhaps those weren't their actual handles after all. Asking the night cashier if he had witnessed a convoy of 4 trucks passing through, I stepped inside. He gave me a crazy eyes look. Claimed that I was only the second truck to halt after he had been working full 3 hours. Instead of going west, the first had been going east. That night, I didn't get any sleep. That caravan had gathered around me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the Roadrunner had slowed down to squish us all together. The way those cars had come in one by one. When I had broken formation, Night Watch's voice had changed. What did they intend to do? If I had remained with them, what may have happened? Would they have taken me to a far-off section of the highway, where I might have been surrounded by those cars? Would they have made me stop driving, or did I have paranoia? Was my dread causing benign action to develop into something evil, or was it just a typical convoy with several cars following it? I will never know, but I have been thinking about how simple it was for me to join that convoy all the time. It all seemed so natural. Given that truckers are expected to watch out for one another, I was incredibly trusting. Since then, I've drove the I-40 dozens of times. Voices on the CB are still requesting convoy formation. They can sound real at times. They may sound kind at times, but I now always say no. Even though driving alone seems less safe and is more lonely, I still do it. The problem with a convoy is that you have to have total faith in the other drivers. You're heading where they're going, matching their pace, and taking their lead. And by the time you realize it, you may be trapped if they are not who they claim to be, or if they are taking you somewhere you shouldn't go. I informed my employer about the situation, explained the handles and the vehicles. They investigated, but couldn't find anything. No other convoys that fit that description have been reported. As if they never existed, there were no trucks registered to their CB handles. However, they were real. I spent more than an hour following them. I had an in-person conversation with Night Watch. I witnessed those cars crashing into each other, too precisely for it to be a coincidence. I occasionally hear a voice on the CB requesting that we form a convoy while I'm driving through dark sections of the highway late at night. Additionally, the handle is never the same. However, there's something about the tone, rhythm, voice, and little southern accent that makes me think of Night Watch. How many drivers take the invitation? I wonder how many people join the convoy and follow those lead trucks into the night, believing that numbers will keep them safe, only to discover too late that danger isn't always ahead or behind you. Sometimes it's standing right next to you, keeping the ideal distance and waiting for the ideal opportunity to close in. In Boise, I ought to have filled up. I made that error due to my busy schedule transporting frozen items from Portland to Salt Lake City. I had persuaded myself that I could reach the less expensive stations outside of Twin Falls. However, winter arrived early that year, and the headwinds in southern Idaho consumed my gasoline more quickly than I had anticipated. My gauge was nearing empty by the time I reached the remote area between Mountain Home and Twin Falls, and the low fuel warning had been sounding for 20 miles. I noticed the sign at that point, 2 miles, food and gas, like 1,000 other signs I had seen. It was a blue sign with white letters that reflected in my headlights. I went out. The off-ramp curled down into what appeared to be nothing at all, away from the few highway lights and into the blackness. No horizon glow recommending a town. There are no structures in sight, At 11 p.m., the blackness of early November was only broken by my headlights. I nearly turned around, but I persisted when the fuel alert chimed once more. Suddenly the station came into view, as if it had been lurking just beyond of my line of sight. It was small, possibly for pump sand, was affixed to a building that might have been from the 1970s with an antique canopy. A neon open sign flickered in the window, and a solitary fluorescent light buzzed over the entrance. Another, there was a van parked close to the air pump. It was quiet and dark. I killed my engine as I approached a diesel pump. The hush was complete and instantaneous. This far from the freeway, no highway noise could be heard. It was completely silent, with only that humming fluorescent lights and no breeze or insects. I went to the pump and swiped my card. After flickering and displaying an error message, the screen went dark. I gave it another go. The same outcome. I noticed a handwritten sign taped to the pump. Inside, pay. I apologize for any inconvenience. I turned to face the building. I could see someone behind the counter through the dirty glass, just a silhouette with interior lights behind it. A clerk at a rural gas station going about their duties. Nothing dangerous. However, there was something about the entire scenario that made me uneasy. The darkness, the solitude, and the total lack of any other indications of human habitation. I was being paranoid, I assured myself. After 9 hours of driving, I was both hungry and exhausted. This was merely a filling station. I required petrol. Straightforward transaction. Enter, pay, fill up, and depart. I made my way to the door. When I pushed it open, a tiny bell on the heavy, antiquated door jangled. I had to squint since the fluorescent lights inside were glaring after the darkness outside. With aisles of snacks and beverages, a coffee machine, and the typical gas station stock, the store appeared larger than it actually was from the outside. Everything appeared a little out of date, including packaging with antiquated logos and names I recognized from the 1990s. The clerk watched me from behind the counter. He was slender, perhaps 60 years old, with grey hair and reading glasses that hung from a chain around his neck. He merely observed me without grinning or saying hello. Fourth pump, I stated. I'll fill it, diesel. He wrote something into an old register after giving a hesitant nod. How much do you anticipate needing? About 60 to 70 gallons. He looked up at me after typing some more numbers. Are you from the highway? Yes. I-84. Tonight is a long drive. City of Salt Lake. He nodded once again, still observing me with an unnatural intensity, as if he were learning my face by heart. Fewer folks are stopping here these days. When they rerouted it back in 2002, the highway removed the majority of the traffic that accounted for the place's antiquated vibe. For 20 years, this station had been slowly withering, most likely only surviving on the occasional desperate driver who miscalculated their fuel. Like me, he inquired, "You need anything else? Coffee, food, sandwiches are in the cooler. Just gas," I murmured, ready to return to the outdoors. Suit yourself. He looked over his shoulder at something. Additionally, I saw the pumps on a security monitor. I could see my automobile on the screen. The vehicle was still parked. It was still dark, but I could now make out a figure sitting in the driver's seat, observing. I became more uneasy. Is that van a wreck? Perhaps they require assistance. The cashier took a quick look at the screen. Oh, they're all right. Simply waiting. What are you waiting for? I gasped as he looked at me, because of something in his face. Not particularly dangerous. It was more like to knowing, as if he was aware of a joke. He claimed that I wasn't for customers. That response didn't appeal to me. Didn't like his delivery. Without saying another word, I gave him my credit card. One line at a time, he watched the receipt print out as he slowly scanned it through the outdated card reader. You be careful out there, he replied, returning everything to them. At night, roads become hazardous. You never know who you'll meet. With the bell jangling loudly behind me, I took my card and left sooner than I should have. I became aware that I had been perspiring inside the store when the chilly air touched my face. I glanced at the van as I hurried back to my pickup. The individual inside was still there, and I could see that they were watching me cross the lot with their head turned toward me. Instead of sitting in my cab as I usually do, I stood at the pump and began pumping fuel. I desired to be able to observe my surroundings. The fuel, I watched the gallons creep up on the pump display as it flowed painfully slowly. 30 Gall 40. The door of the van opened. One man left, medium height, dressed in pants and a dark blazer. He simply began to go toward the station door without giving me a direct look. However, there was a problem with his gait. To casual, to purposeful, like someone feigning a sense of ease. When he got to the door, he paused, turned, and gave me a look. Across the lot, we looked at each other, and he grinned not in a nice way. His smile conveyed that he was aware of something I was not. He then made his way back to his van and climbed inside. 60 and 50 gallons. Come on, I thought. Quicker. A second car pulled into the parking lot. Two individuals can be seen in the cab of a dark-colored pickup truck. The pumps were not reached by it. Rather, it parked close to the lane leading back to the highway on the far side of the lot. Headlights and the engine are still on. 65 grams. The rest of the fuel was squeezing out before the auto cut off, and it was now just barely dribbling. I gazed at the pump screen, wishing it would go more quickly, constantly alert to the truck in front of me, the van behind me, and the clerk inside who had warned me to drive carefully. The pump clicked off at last. 70 gallons. With trembling hands, I screwed my gasoline cap back on and changed the nozzle. I was overreacting, according to the rational side of my brain. Thus, there were other cars present. What then? It was a service station. At petrol stations, people pull over, but my instinct was shouting. There was a serious problem. After locking the doors and starting the engine, I got into my cab. The headlights on the van turned on. Someone stepped out of the truck, stood alongside the car, and watched me as the passenger door opened. Since there was no other option to return to the highway, I put my truck in drive and made my way to the exit. I had to slow down and get past the truck because it was partially obstructing it. The individual outside stepped closer to my truck as I went by, getting close enough for me to see his face in my headlights. A young man, about 25, with a blank gaze that made my neck stand on end. I continued, checking my mirrors all the time. I squeaked past the vehicle and sped up the access road toward the freeway. Behind me, the truck pulled out. Both of them followed the van. On the wheel, my hands were slippery. There was nowhere to pull off or turn around on the dark, narrow entrance road. Just a quick 2-mile drive back to the freeway. The van and truck followed me, keeping their distance, their headlights shining in my mirrors. I thought they would follow when I eventually made it to the interstate and turned back onto I-84, but they didn't. At the end of the access road, they came to a stop and sat there while I drove off. I continued to stare at my mirrors until their lights faded into the night. I didn't stop as I drove all the way to Salt Lake City. I jumped at every car that came too close and every set of headlights that came into view in my mirrors for 8 hours. I delivered just after sunrise and the warehouse's regular operation. After the night I'd experienced, the early sun felt unreal to the other truckers. Later, I looked at maps, looked up the gas station online, and even called the Idaho Department of Transportation in an attempt to locate it. There is no documentation of a gasoline stop at that exit. There is an exit. Since then, I've drove past it, but based on all that access road leads to nothing but empty ground, according to the map and database. I do, however, have the fuel receipt. My glove box is where I keep it. 70 gallons at $3.89 per gallon from a station named Miller's Fuel and Food, which has a disconnected phone number and an invalid address. Tangible evidence that I paused at a location that isn't there. I've casually asked other drivers if they've ever encountered odd situations at gas stations in rural areas. Most people dismiss it with a laugh, yet some go silent and shift the topic. Even if you're running on fumes, keep driving if you ever see a station that feels wrong, an older driver urged, pulling me aside. There are some stops from which you never return. I didn't inquire about his meaning. I had no desire to find out. I now keep my tank full. Don't allow it to fall below a quarter. On well-traveled routes, I schedule my gasoline stops at significant stations. Additionally, I ignore the exit signs when I drive late at night in southern Idaho too closely because I'm still curious about what that clerk said. You never know who you'll meet, not what you could encounter. It was the people, not the place, that were dangerous. Just waiting for customers was the van driver, the vehicle that parked itself to obstruct the exit. How, without any obvious indication, they all moved in unison, and I'm curious as to how many motorists have come into the station in need of gas and never returned to the highway. How often have those same cars been waiting in that lot? Those same individuals were observing from the shadows, following a pattern that I broke by departing too soon. I got out, however. I'm not sure if that's due to my intelligence or pure luck. I'm not sure if they're still waiting at that non-existent station, anticipating the next car to make the same error I did. I just know that the receipt is still in my possession. Evidence that I was present, evidence of its authenticity, and occasionally, late at night, I consider returning to check if it's still there. If they're still waiting there, at my typical Kansas location, I observed cameras. A place to relax, dozens of them, building modules, light poles, and bathroom corners. I had been here for 6 years. Cameras had never existed before. I inquired with another truck driver, "Do you notice those cameras?" He gave one a direct glance. "Which cameras?" "That's right. Red light, black dome." He gazed at it. "Man, don't see anything." I used my phone to take a picture. There was blank space where the camera should have been in the image. A trooper from the state arrived. Regarding the cameras, I questioned him. "There is no surveillance in this rest area," he remarked. "I could see them, dozens of them, watching, but it never has." I noticed cameras at various rest sites during the ensuing weeks. Different states, always the same, hidden from cameras and from everyone but me. I asked other drivers. No one noticed them. I visited a physician. Everything is normal, including blood work and brain imaging. At a truck stop in Oklahoma 3 months later, a trucker came up to me. He had wild eyes. He mumbled, "Can you see them?" The cameras. My heart stopped beating. Indeed, his face was a mixture of relief and fear. I felt like I was losing my mind. "It's been 6 months since Kansas." He took hold of my arm. "They are aware of the onlookers once you spot them. These days, they are ubiquitous." Following me outside my house, he lowered his voice. "They never stop observing." Before I could ask him any more questions, he left. 4 months have passed since then. I see cameras everywhere now. Near my residence, there are rest spots, truck stops, petrol stations, and even residential streets. I can also see who is watching. Dark SUVs and white automobiles. There are always the persons inside using laptops or iPads. They always park where they can. Look, one showed up outside my condo complex last week. The same motif. 3 hours of viewing, 2 persons, and 1 tablet. I stood in front of my window, staring at them. They waved, looking back. What they're tracking is unknown to me. I'm not sure why the cameras are only visible to specific individuals. I'm not sure whether it's a test, surveillance, or something more serious. This is all I know. You can't turn off the cameras once you've seen them, and they never go away once they realize you can see them. I am writing this from a New Mexico rest area. Here are 8 cameras that are hidden from view. Watching me type this is the white vehicle parked 3 spots over. I can't stop thinking about what the trucker said, how it began in Kansas, and how they know you know them once you see them. I'm beginning to question whether the cameras are actually cameras. Perhaps they are merely indicators, flags indicating who has been chosen. Perhaps the thing that makes you visible to whatever is staring back is seeing them. At a truck stop in Omaha, the package was beneath my windshield wiper. Fly Manila. Block letters for my name. Torres, Daniel. There was a list of names within, dates as well as places. At the top was my name. Daniel Torres, eastbound I-80, October 15th. 390 is the mile marker. Robert Chen, I-80 eastbound, October 15th. 390 is the mile marker. August 16th, Marcus Wade, I-80 heading east. Mile marker 390 Jennifer salutations. I-80, eastbound. Mile marker 390. October 18th, totaling 8 names. Mile marker 390 was 30 miles ahead of me on my journey today. October 15th, I looked up the names on the internet. 3 years ago, Robert Chen passed away. At mile marker 390, a truck accident occurred. Dozed off while operating a vehicle. 2 years ago, Marcus Wade passed away. Same place, same cause, same highway. David Sullivan and Jennifer Hale are both deceased. Everything is close to marker 390. Everyone allegedly dozed off. On the list, 4 people were already deceased. Tonight was my planned time. As I approached marker 390, I drove, radio loud, windows down, alert as hell. My phone rang. Unknown figure. Breathing, then silence, then a voice that was twisted. It was best that you remained in Omaha. The call was cut off. Up ahead, on the shoulder, is an automobile. Flashing hazards. Someone is beckoning for assistance. Every instinct told me to keep going. The trap was this. I sped by in my reflection. The individual simply watched me leave. 390, near the mile marker. I didn't breathe. Nothing took place. I continued to drive. My phone rang once more. The same voice. You were meant to halt. When they cease, it's simpler. Who are you? We're doing some research. Patterns of fatigue. Vulnerability to accidents. You were chosen to take part. People are being killed by you. Show it. Over a 3-year period. 4 drivers fell asleep. That's not murder. That's statistics. Additionally, there is no such number for this conversation. The call was cut off. The news came 2 days later. 1 more truck driver. Fatal collision close to mile marker 390. It's the 5th incident in 3 years. One of the dates on my list matched this one. They got someone, but it wasn't the person they had in mind. I no longer drive the I-80. I avoid that stretch completely and take longer routes. I received another envelope last week. Distinct names, a different marker, and a different highway. I recognized one, but it didn't have my name on it. I had met the driver in Arizona. Good man. 20 years of spotless driving. I made an effort to alert him. His phone was unplugged. 3 weeks ago was the date for his name. Both lists are still with me. I wait, checking them constantly. Seek patterns as they are present. The highway continues to grow longer because of the individuals who create the lists, monitor us, research us, and use us as data points. When I got to the Gary, Indiana distribution center at 5 in the morning, the lot was filled. At loading docks, 15 trucks were in line. I was number 12. Like clockwork, trucks loaded one after the other, taking 20 minutes apiece. The 7th truck, however, never emerged. At 7 a.m., I saw it arrive at Port 3. Backing up to the bay is a man wearing a red baseball cap. 20 minutes, 30, 40, while others drove around the vehicle and departed. It simply sat there. When it was my time, I also drove around it. Windows were dark, and the driver's door was closed. The loading supervisor was inside when I asked, "What's going on with truck 7 at Dock 3? He looked at his clipboard. Dock 3 has been closed for maintenance since Monday, so it has been empty all morning, but a truck is currently there. Reaching the dock entrance, he peered out. You see, empty. The truck has vanished. Dock 3 had been there 2 minutes before, but it was now vacant. 3. The same distribution center a few days later. The 7th truck reappeared. Same pier. Different vehicle. Different company. 3. It drew in and remained. Others came and went, but never relocated. I requested that the guard check on it. He turned his gaze to the docks. No truck is visible to me. I returned 6 times in the next month. Truck 7 always showed up at Dock 3. Everyone but me can never see the different trucks and drivers. I took pictures. A dock that was deserted was displayed. During my 8th visit, I approached Truck 7, The air was frigid and heavy. I felt my teeth ache from a low humming. The driver's side mirror caused my attention, and I saw myself standing there in the reflection, but I also saw a different, translucent, and flickering form of myself. Two worlds in one location. I took a step back and went. By the time I checked my rearview mirror, Truck 7 had finally pulled out and was heading for the exit. However, the gate remained up as it lifted and went through. In my mirror, the truck kept moving down the road. However, the road was deserted as I looked straight ahead. I returned yesterday. There was Truck 7. I was the driver. At Dock 3, I imagined myself sitting in that taxi. Same expression, same jacket, same face, holding out for an unattainable goal. I received a new work order last night. Gary Distribution Center is the pickup location. It is 5 a.m. I looked at the timetable. I am the 7th truck. 6 hours from now, tomorrow morning, is the appointment time. I've spent the entire night gazing over the assignment. I break my contract if I don't show up. However, I can't help but worrying about that reflection if I do show up. If I pull up to Dock 3 as Truck 7, there are two me's in one location. Additionally, I question whether the me I saw yesterday was the tomorrow's me, already apprehended, already waiting. I observed all of those drivers for 2 months. Now, where are they? Somehow, it's still there, layered like reflections. In 6 hours, the distribution center will open. My truck is prepared. There are loads on the road. I can't stop thinking, though. Have I already decided on this in another chronology? Am I stuck in a loop, seeing myself? Whether I'll show up isn't the question. Whether I'll have a choice is the question. A choice is the question.